We slid our bare feet along the warm planks of the old pier and listened to the sea as if it were a neighbour. I was 8, perhaps 9, and that summer felt stitched to the skin sun on the backs of my calves, the salt left on my tongue after every sprint toward the water, a line of laughter running down the street like a ribbon. The village woke with the tide, and we children threaded through it as if through a long, bright corridor. My mother wore a dress the colour of faded cornflowers and carried a tin lunchbox that smelled faintly of lemon soap. My father wore a hat that shaded his eyes as he spoke little, but his hands spoke plenty, tying lines of rope, checking nets, patting the old dog that slept beneath the bench at the ribbed harbour. My sister Lila and I chased the gulls with a kind of reckless fidelity, the way kids do when the world is both daring and safe. That morning the air tasted of heat and brine. We rode a bus that coughed its way toward the edge of the village, where the road forgot the map and the sea began to glitter beyond a fringe of pines. The market stalls smelled of oranges and honeyed pears. A man in a striped t-shirt sold ice, and the melt of it painted pale rivers on our wrists. We walked to the far jetty, where the water wore a crown of foam, and the boats leaned as if listening for a dream. It was there, after a lunch of crusty bread and red cabbage slaw, that I slipped away from the chorus of grown-ups and followed a pawprint of footprints toward the dunes. Behind the dunes lay a hidden cove I did not know existed, a mouth of water tucked between clipped grass and salt-stained rocks. The path narrowed to a whisper, and the world seemed to lean in closer, as if it too wanted to hear the hush. In that quiet, I found a tide pool, a tiny world squeezed between two stubborn stones, where the water held a mirror bright as a coin, and the life within moved with the patient, stubborn grace of something that knew it didn't have to hurry. A starfish clung to a rock like a dancer frozen mid-pose, arms spread in a slow, careful invitation to the sea. A crab scuttled sideways along the edge, its legs precise and patient, as if every inch it covered had been measured before. It was cool and alive, and not mine, yet it asked nothing more than space to breathe. When I finally set it back, with a careful splash into the pool, the water welcomed the star again, as if the sea itself was singing a quiet note of mercy. I looked up and saw my mother's smile before I remembered to blink and pretend I had been watching the horizon all along. She did not scold me or praise me aloud. She simply placed a hand on my shoulder and pointed toward the shore where the path met the world again. "Take your time," she seemed to say, not with words, but with a breath that coaxed my breath toward gentleness. That small moment, touching a creature and releasing it back to life, with nothing to gain and everything to learn, felt like the first hinge of a door opening inside me. The rest of that day stretched like a warm thread. We ate peaches that we dribbled juice down our chins. We climbed back over the dunes and watched the light slide down the rooftops of the village. The harbour's bells rang in the late afternoon, as men hauled nets and children rode their bikes on the rutted lanes. I did not yet know the word compassion, but I carried its taste in my mouth, as if it were a bright mineral, a mineral you mine by listening, by bending toward another creature's need, by staying still long enough to hear the quiet insistence of life around you. That evening, as the sun slipped gold into the harbour and our feet cooled in the shade of the cottage's back steps, I understood that memory, like the sea, holds both depth and surface, both brightness and dark. The starfish and the tide pool did not save the world by themselves, but they saved me by offering a model for mercy, the gaze that notices a small thing, and gives it time to be. My parents did not preach grand moral sermons that night. They spoke softly through small rituals. The ladle of soup warmed on the stove, the prayer whispered before bread, the shared silence when the room grew heavy with the day's warmth. And I learned how to linger long enough for gratitude to take root. In the years since, the memory has seeped into the marrow of who I am. Not all days are tidal pools, not all acts are starfish rescues, but the thread remains, a way of moving toward life with slow curiosity, a habit of listening before mutterings of worry take the room. There were moments when the world felt unstable, when fear frightened the air, and love demanded more attention than I could give. In those times I have returned, not to the grand sweep of horizons, but to the way that tide pool held its own pale light, the way the starfish clung to a rock and then found its way home, the way water always knew how to find the seam between land and water, between fear and faith. I have learned to carry this memory with me as a quiet map. It does not erase trouble, but it teaches me to approach trouble with a gentleness that is not weakness, but a form of respect. It has kept me patient when words fail, and steady when sorrow gathers in the corners of rooms. It reminds me that the world is not only what we conquer or own, it is what we tend, by listening, by offering a small mercy, by letting things be, and by returning them to their proper place when the moment has passed. And I have learned to tell this story to those who thought perhaps life had no more room for miracles, to remind them that wonder does not vanish with age. It simply moves inward, like a shell tucked beneath a chair cushion, waiting for someone to lift it and listen again. Now, in the quiet hours of morning and night, when the house steadies itself around my breathing, I can hear the sea in the soft hiss of a kettle, see the sun on the sill, feel the old wood warm beneath my palms. The memory returns not as a single scene, but as a living practice, to walk slowly toward the ordinary, and to find the extra edge of grace there, in a child's astonished gaze, in a neighbour's small kindness, in a moment when I choose not to rush, but to linger, and to learn again how to be with another being, even for a breath. Time passes, of course. People grow older, shutters clatter in the wind, and the summer holidays drift away like boats carrying away our names. Yet the tide pool remains, a quiet teacher long after the sea has moved on. It teaches me that the world is tender, that life is not a series of obstacles to endure, but a collection of small, patient openings. It teaches me to hold memory as one holds a delicate bird, carefully, with reverence, and with the firm belief that to keep it is to keep a piece of home alive. And so I am grateful for that summer, the long light, the salt, the quiet mercy of a mother's glance, the measured kindness of a father's hands, the patient wonder of a child who learned to listen. For in that season I learned to love the slow, steady work of paying attention, to find meaning not in dramatic triumph, but in the daily act of choosing gentleness. Time may pass, but meaning endures.